Welcome back to the HB channel. This is HBFM. Um, it's actually the HB legal stream, but doing it radio style today. And I'm interested in doing some other streams like Rusters and possibly Miss the Peepers show. I don't know what channel that will ultimately be on, but we'll see about that. Anyway, I'd like to get on a more regular schedule and do some of the shows like the old days. Um, I'd like to get on that grind in the coming days. Maybe we'll do a Rusters or a Busters or a Les Spamies. Don't know yet, but I appreciate everybody who tunes in, and we'll see if we can keep this garden growing, as they say in some places. I think that I'd also like to get Tyrone Jones from Tea Time involved. That would be nice. Just want to get a lot of the top tier people who maybe haven't gotten the spotlight yet to, get their chance. I've had Josh Jack before. That would be nice to get him back again. He's one of the Philadelphia local comics that I've worked with many times in the past. And I think that he could potentially have a lot to offer the show. He was on one time before. I don't remember if that's the legal stream or Busters, but it was fun. He was fighting a little bit with Dark Tina. So it was a fun little interaction. We'll see if he's a part of it in the future or not. Really don't know, but I also want to have some new guests, musicians, maybe people with interesting jobs, maybe even some spiritual teachers. That might be interesting, if people are willing to give that a chance, some atypical, different from the norm type of people. But we'll see, if we can, potentially if we can, I'd try to get some other streams in soon. Trying to figure out the whole Lesme situation because Jarvita's channel has been taken down, and I've been telling her, like, all right, you got to do the appeal. Like, I can help you once you do the appeal, but until then, there's not a ton that I can do. And it seems like she's really dragging her feet with the whole appeal situation. I don't know if she's just not wanting to do it or it's too confusing of a process, but once that's taken care of, we can finally, do something to move forward. A lot of times with this stuff, you got to kind of go on Twitter, X, as it were, and tag Team YouTube and tell them, like, all right, what are you doing? What, we got to take care of this. At least that's what they do for the more famous creators. I don't know what they do for the not so famous creators. It seems like, unfortunately, there's like a two-tiered system where the more famous people get better treatment. I guess that's not all that surprising. given the way that things usually work in the world. But it would be nice if they didn't prioritize the famous people quite so much. I know that back when Susan Wojcicki was still alive, um, Ethan Klein would do a lot of personal, make a lot of personal communiques with her and try and, you know, get things done for him that potentially, you know, the average person would not be able to have access to, you know. So I guess what I'm asking you and everyone else is, let's get this channel to 1 million subscribers, and then YouTube will actually give a fuck about us. Now, is that possible? I guess, you know. I don't like to limit myself. I like to think big. That's why I eat so much. But listen, anyway, you know, I like to think big, and I think, like, you know, my friend Josh Jack would always be like, you know, there's no way we're ever going to be famous or popular. And I think, like, okay, is it likely? Who knows? But why tell yourself that you can't? You know, I don't even tell myself that I can't be a billionaire. Whether I can or not is irrelevant. The point is that the people who tell themselves they can't accomplish something are guaranteed not to. And the people who, you know, just say to themselves, let's wait and see, are the people who potentially actually do it. It's like that famous Steve Jobs quote, the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. And, you know, so the people who are delusional enough to think they could have a 1 million subscribers are ultimately the ones who do. So, will I achieve it? Let's just leave that open to only time will tell. You know, the person who tells themselves that they can't be a professional athlete, like let's imagine Michael Jordan or, you know, LeBron James or an Allen Iverson told themselves, there's no way I could ever be an NBA player. Well, then likely they never would become that. You know, they could say, well, it's unlikely, but let's give it a chance. And then that at least leaves the door open to see what might happen. And that's what you got to do. You know, people might say you're delusional, you're crazy, you're manic, you're psychotic. But it's not 0% of the population who makes it big. It's definitely a non-0%. So it's not entirely crazy. It's just as crazy to think you could never make it as it is to think that you could make it, right? To have, it's just like, you know, people say that those who believe in God are delusional or crazy. Well, those who, you know for sure that there is no God are equally, if not more, delusional or crazy, because how could you ever know? You know, the universe is quite complicated. There's a lot going on. And, you know, I always like to think about this, the Big Bang. We talk about the Big Bang quite a bit. And, you know, okay, so let's say that evolutionary scientists are correct, and the Big Bang is what created the universe. What I would ask is, let's go with the premise that that is real. all right, everything has to have an origin. What caused the Big Bang, right? If energy can be created or can't be created, well, then what caused the energy that created the Big Bang? In other words, when a bomb explodes, it doesn't just explode out of nowhere. Somebody has to light it or launch it or in some way ignite it and initiate the explosion. So a bomb exploding doesn't just start with the explosion. It has a causal, um, there's a causal link. There's a cause and effect. So my question is, what caused what caused the Big Bang, and what came before it? What preceded it? And so then we start to look at, okay, was there an initial event before that? Did it start from another universe, a multiverse, some kind of foreign land? And then where did that originate? And it's like, okay, that almost starts to beg the question of like, is there a divine, intelligent creator outside of this? Now, what's up, Russell Cook? Good to see you. Love you. You're amazing. You might have heard me talk about this before, and at risk of sounding like Joe Rogan era 2011, I will say that had quite an interesting mushroom trip, Amanita muscaria specifically. It's the mushroom you might remember from, I think, from Alice in Wonderland, but also from Mario. In fact, they even name check the mushroom in Mario RPG. And they talk about, well, they don't say much about it, but they show it and they mention it, and it's like, it's interesting, right? So, sorry, I'm a little sick, maybe. Anyway, so the whole Amanita thing is interesting, and my experience was, I took a dose. I don't know if it was a heroic dose or maybe a slightly above average dose. Yeah, sorry for all the sneezing and nose blowing and etc. But what I wanted to say was, I took some Amanita, got it online. I forget where. I took some of it, and by the way, if you go to gas stations or drugstore, head shops, they might sell a product called Amanita or Amanita muscaria. I would definitely be careful. Sometimes all that is a slight bit of mushrooms and mainly THC, so you're not getting authentic Amanita. Mostly, you got to look online. But anyway, my experience was this was dried mushroom, and I took a little bit of it, and it had somewhat of an effect, just a mild, slight effect. And I was like, okay, this is really nothing special. So I took more and more and more, and it got to the point where I was really gradually it increased more and more, and it was not a particularly pleasant, there wasn't like a fun high or buzz really. What happened was it just started to get weirder, and I would get like this twitch or this feeling in my neck that was weird, and eventually it got so strong that, and this really rarely happens with has happened with psychedelics or dissociatives for me specifically. It didn't so much, make me hallucinate or trip out in my current reality. What it did was far more profound, and it was more like what people talk about with things like DMT, where it totally transported me to a different location, possibly a different body altogether. And what happened was I basically lived, several lives in what felt like maybe like fast forward mode, entire lifetimes. And it kept focusing, it kept uh, portraying me in this life where I hit my head, maybe cut my head. I was skateboarding and I fell and I hit my head, no helmet or nothing. And my mom was there and she yelled my name, and then it was lights out and I was dead. And that happened several times, and it would repeat, and the whole world would repeat. Now, let me be clear, it wasn't just my lifetime repeating, it was the entire genesis of the universe, of the world, the Big Bang, or the world being generated. And it was a repeating process that would happen. It's really hard to, I wish somehow I was able to record this with like a, maybe if I had Neuralink or some modern creation, I could have an actual recording of the experience I had. That would be pretty profound. The only kind of thing close to a recording is just my personal account, but yeah, it was, and then it would kind of like, I would look at the meaning of, I would start thinking about the meaning of life, and time really slowed down. And one of the things it told me, and who knows why the fuck I was thinking this, but one of the things that it told me was that the meaning of life is skateboarding, right? Now, that seems like a silly thing that I would think and be biased towards thinking, of course, because I grew up skateboarding. But I started to ruminate a little bit and think about that. And let's remember, so like I'm totally separated from the world, from regular life while I'm thinking all this. And my wife told me afterwards that I was like, I kept walking over and sitting in the bathroom. And so I was doing things in the real world that I wasn't aware of, but in my mind, I just kept having these real strong psychedelic experiences. And one of the things it kept telling me was that skateboarding was the meaning of life. Now, what does that mean, right? So if you never rode a skateboard, it would be kind of stupid to think, okay, this is the meaning of life. I think the larger meaning was that for me in particular, skateboarding was the meaning of life because it was something that I did so often. And so the greater meaning of this, and I'm potentially I might explore this again through the use of Amanita. It may not be anytime soon because it's one of those drugs where I feel like maybe you take it once a year. Maybe that's the correct amount of time, unless you're a real spiritual psychonaut warrior. Maybe you do it all the time. But for me, and it's classified as a delirium, actually, not a psychedelic for whatever reason. But I have to say, as far as awakening and mind opening, it was very strong, stronger than I ever had with LSD or DXM. Maybe DXM is like a close second to some degree, but this was far more expansive and mind altering. And I haven't done every drug, but let's say alcohol, weed, DXM, ketamine, um, Ambien. None of those things have quite gotten me to this level. And so when I go back to it, so the meaning of life. How is the meaning of life skateboarding? Now, I don't know the entirety of it and why it thought that, but I think what it really means is that the meaning of life, in a sense, is movement. The meaning of life is, people say, is the meaning of life to help people? Is it to improve the world? Is it to be selfless, etc.? I would say all of those things are good, and maybe if there is heaven, maybe those are the ways to get there. But the greater implication of this is that the meaning of life is simply, um, you know, I think part of the reason people get a runner's high, of course, you could talk about the scientific, the science, the science behind it. Things like endorphins, serotonin, dopamine, etc. All of those, mental effects it's having. But the greater implication is that when you're in any kind of extreme movement and intense movement, you're experiencing the universe in, the universe is very subjective, but what you're experiencing is real connection to the meaning of life. And I think that the meaning of life, and I'm not, I don't need to explain to you, I'm no professional, if there is such a thing as a professional modern, what do they call it? What was Alan Watts? Anyway, not a psychologist, but a person who ruminates and thinks about life. And so what I'm saying is that movement is maybe the closest, extreme movement, athletic movement, sports, running, skateboarding, etc., is the closest that you are to experiencing pure awareness, pure perception, pure universal consciousness, because um, what you're experiencing, what movement is the meaning of life. Why is that? Why would I say that movement is the meaning of life? Surely people have experienced, you know, um, profound experiences through meditation and yoga and plenty of things that are more sedentary, and not that yoga is sedentary. There's definitely bodily uses of your muscles engaged, etc. But the reason that movement is the meaning of life, I think, is that, or perhaps when it is the closest to the meaning of life, is that when you are in movement, when you are doing exactly what the world is doing. The world is always moving. All the planets are moving. Even the sun doesn't. I don't know if the sun rotates, but everything that exists, including down to atoms, everything is perpetually in motion. So when you are in motion, you are in sync with the universe, the universal consciousness, and ultimately what God or the universe has intended you to do. So the more active you are, the more you are doing things, especially without like a secondary intention. If you're just straight up running because you like to run and not thinking, doing sports because you just want to play sports, they talk about the flow state, and my belief is that the flow state is when you are totally, totally existing in tandem with the universe and the meaning of life. And that's not to say your life can't be meaningful if you're doing a more sedentary activity, whether it's writing or drawing, especially if you're writing about spiritual matters and such things, you can be in sync with the meaning of life. But I think that there's something especially holy or spiritual about being a human being in motion, whether it's a little bit of motion or a lot of motion. What's up, David Falls? Good to see you. I'm having a very deep, if you will, discussion here. Um, of course, approach this with a healthy dose of skepticism. Maybe I just totally got high and was sniffing my own farts and intellectually masturbating in my own brain. But I will say, like, none of these thoughts were felt like they originated in my own mind. They felt like they were coming from a greater source, a godly or a spiritual source. At one point, I felt like I was in a different body. So all of this is kind of, it is unfortunate, right? Because you get to a certain point where you come back to life, you come down to earth, the trip is over, and you have to kind of piece together the thoughts you had. And I mean, I remember the initial feeling and thinking when I was done tripping was a lot of gratitude because, as Eckhart Tolle said about LSD, a lot of these a lot of these hallucinogens, etc., um, can be more of a rude awakening that, practicing consciousness techniques, consciousness and awareness and all that stuff, meditation, that can be kind of a more gradual achievement of awareness or enlightenment, whereas, taking entheogens, hallucinogens, psychedelics can be more of a quick, fast, direct, rude awakening. Psychedelics don't give a fuck about you, right? They don't care if whatever you take, that's the trip you're going to have. And that's just kind of how it goes. So if you go for it and you take a bunch of them, the mushrooms don't care. They're just ready to go and make you have whatever trip you're supposed to have based on your dosage. And that's good and bad, right? Like, it's good if you end up having if you approach it like a spiritual warrior, so to speak, or a psychedelic adventurer. Whereas if you approach it very fearfully, um, that fear might manifest itself during your trip, and it could potentially lead you to have a literally, not literally, but very, very vividly and figuratively have an experience of hell on earth. Um, and that's not something that I think it's self-explanatory why you wouldn't want to have an experience of hell on earth. It's just I definitely had my fair share of bad trips in the day, and that's kind of why I'm not in a rush to do um, mushrooms again. But that's not necessarily, I would say, and I don't really like to ever um, endorse drug use, psychedelic use, etc. Except maybe ketamine. That might be good for depression. Maybe not such a crazy thing to do. In fact, I feel like for some people that may be more helpful and less uh, scary than smoking weed. But I'm not against weed or pro ketamine for the sake of the audience. I'm just saying, my greater point is, if you want to take a psychedelic, that's going to be your decision. Don't do it because I said so. In fact, I'm not saying so. I'm simply outlining my experience, and take it for what it's worth. Um, and even accept the possibility that I'm totally bullshitting. I'm not bullshitting, but the greater point is just to always be skeptical of what people are saying. Even if I say I'm not bullshitting, maybe I am. Um, also don't take that to mean that I am bullshitting. I'm just saying, use skepticism. What up, Poon? Are you in a better mood today? We're talking about psychedelics, and maybe I am bullshitting, and that's the point, right? Don't listen to people online Don't listen to Joe Rogan. Don't listen to even Mark Maron or anybody as far as like believing they have the whole truth. Um, just listen to what they say, consider it. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, and that's the bottom line. That's the brass tacks, folks. Um, and even don't necessarily buy into your trip fully. Like the mushroom trip I was talking about, maybe that revealed the entire truths of the universe, or maybe it was just chemicals fucking with my brain waves and fucking with my thought processes. There's not really a clear way to know, but it does beg the question, and the question is like, if a trip is meaningless, if taking drugs and having these experiences is totally meaningless, why do they have such a complicated form? Like, how come when I take mushrooms, I don't just see a bunch of stupid shapes and colors and wavy lines and bullshit, right? Like, if something's fucking with your brain, wouldn't you think that it would just make you see a bunch of stupid crap, like aliens or stupid bullshit? And, and some drugs will do that. But my point is, like, why is it that when I take mushrooms, it's this extremely focused, what seems deliberate display of time, whatever the opposite of dilation is. Dilation is getting bigger. Time contracting into a fast forward like motion that's like a movie. It's like, how could uh, this silly little mushroom growing in the ground make my brain have such a profound experience, like a like a brilliantly edited movie, like Koyaanisqatsi times 10, or The Tree of Life, which I've never seen, but what I assume is very meaningful. It's like, how does this? And I don't give myself credit. Like, okay, so like maybe in my lifetime I could make one meaningful movie, but I don't think this came from me. I think this came from a different place, and it just generated itself in real time and just told me, these are the thoughts. In other words, it's less like my mind created it, and it's more like the mushroom or the source that I was connected to is actually what created this whole effect. And when that's the case, it's kind of like, do we? It did, and I've struggled. I've gone back and forth with the whole concept of God, and is God real? Is God not real? And I hate to even say that, because if God is listening, he's probably thinking like, "What the fuck is wrong with you? You don't believe in me? Look at all this amazing stuff I invented and created. We got grass, we've got trees, we've got people walking around, and all of this is in a higher definition than any video games that we've ever created, you know? Um, but it also makes you think, okay, so here's a heavy thought, right? So if humans, man, woman, etc., third gender folk, whatever, if we were all created in the image of God, does that mean that eventually we will? I'm just wondering. I'm postulating, thinking if this is what it means. If we were all created in the image of God, does that perhaps mean that we will one day become just as powerful and influential as God himself? In other words, if we were created in the image of God, are we supposed to then, that means we are like God, we are made to be just like God. I'm just using language here. If you are just like, if I was just like a scientist, that would mean that I have the potential to be just as smart, just as brilliant, and just as powerful as a scientist. So does that mean that one day humans are actually meant to achieve and express the full potential of God himself? And is that what we're starting to get to with things like AI and things like, all this kind of crazy stuff, this technological influence that's reaching the world? I don't have the answers, but it is seeming like with the dawn of AI, and we've been talking about this for quite a while, right? With AI, specifically artificial intelligence, for the extremely uninitiated, if you've been under a rock for the past 5 years or 3 years, we potentially could get to a point where we are creating self-aware computers that have feelings, emotions, intuitions, thought processes, that are basically in every way, or not basically, literally in every way, mimicking the human form. Let's say one day we have a machine similar to those 3D printing scanners that can scan a chair and then reprint that entire chair in plastic or whatever. Let's say there's a machine that can scan a brain, human brain, down to its molecular level and then recreate it, whether it be in computer form or in organic human cell form, either one. We might start with human cells. The point is, if we could do that, do the same with the nervous system and every part of the body, we would then have some digital component where it goes into a robot body or something like that. We could potentially get to the point where something could happen. Now, Poon is talking in the chat, Punicus Maximus, and Betty Spaghetti as well. Betty says, I think the entire goal is to eventually infuse our own consciousness into it, thus making us immortal. So, I will say this then. If we could, and that's an interesting idea that I would say makes a lot of sense, right? If we could make something that could have its own consciousness, then why couldn't we do the same thing with our own mind? And it seems like, Betty, it seems like you've maybe read about this or listened to shows about this. A lot of people don't know about AI. A lot of people, all they know about AI is that maybe like you can use it to make George Carlin do a kickflip over Donald Trump in a video, or make Ariana Grande sing the national anthem while being kicked by a goat in a video. But there's far greater implications to this AI, and like you're saying, like the idea that we could potentially have humans in in an AI, in a in a with the power of AI, have the human consciousness, soul, brain, whatever makes us us. Um, if we're able to transport our being, our consciousness, into these more better, everlasting devices, human 2.0, it's like these organic meat bodies that we have are, they at our best, a good looking person is beautiful, but let's be honest, like even the hottest man or woman, somebody who's really hot at 23 and vigorous and full of life, add 40 years to them, they're 60. And I'm not saying there aren't like good looking, strong, there are Jack LaLance or whatever his name is. There are people in their 60s and their 70s and even their 80s who have far out outpaced me. Although that isn't like a high bar, but still, there are people who have in their 70s who have outpaced me in my 30s physically by quite a bit. So it is really a lot of your action, but still, as horribly as I treat my body, I have better skin than a 70-year-old. And what I'm trying to say is that I am blowing smoke up my ass, but I know time will treat me as badly as it treats everyone. The point, rather, is that over time, everyone degrades. But if you look at your, let's say you've got one of those mixers. I don't remember the brand, but you know that iconic, batter mixer that people buy once and never need to replace. There's a lot of these appliances. Sure, there's like planned obsolescence where you get a new phone every year, but there's a lot of products where you could buy them 40 years ago and they're still tough as nails. They're still going, not a dent, not an issue 40 years later. And, if we could do that with humans, um, if we could do that with humans, we could drastically decrease the the aging rate, right? So, like, I don't know if the ultimate robot human form is to be, robots with skin or what, but I think that let's just for the sake of imagination, imagine that we were all turned into Tesla bots, those uh, iRobot looking robots that Elon Musk creates, and we're all just not. That's not the best example because they don't even have faces. But I'm just saying, like, let's say we're turned into metal robots and they all have faces, they all look like us, we're all metal. Um, Maybe that's a dystopian future that we don't want. But let's just explore that for a second. Um, a material as strong as metal can put up with quite a bit more um, abuse than human skin. Um, for example, if you take a piece of, if you look at the Cybertruck, I'm not endorsing the Cybertruck. They're not well made. They're small. If you're a man and you want a powerful pickup truck, it's not the way to go. But it is interesting in a few aspects. One of them being that if you shoot it with a bow and arrow or a gun, it will take a dent, but it will not break. So potentially, if we were able to make robot humans with bulletproof capabilities, they would be far stronger and more able to withstand impact than current humans. You know, if you, I don't need to explain to you, but if you shoot a gun or you take a knife to a human's flesh, even the strongest, manliest, or alpha female, whoever, you take a sharp instrument to their skin, even the thickest skin in the world is going to easily break and bleed and everything. Same with a gun. There's nothing really to do about it. Betty says that I read somewhere that the human body will degrade and die without any exterior forces or disease by the age of 125 or something, almost like a genetic timestamp we can't go past. Wow. Okay, so that's interesting. Wow. So you're saying that even in the most optimal circumstance, you've sheltered yourself from all outward influences, you've exercised, you've done everything right to possibly be healthy. You get to the age 125, your body is still going to fall apart. Okay. So that means that then really the only way that we could make people last longer um, would be so there's a few routes we could go, right? So if you're saying that the organs will die, then and yeah, you don't know if anything is for sure true. So I'm just basing this on the premise that maybe it's true. As we talked about earlier, being skeptical, but uh, let's say it is true. Um, if you could replace those organs every 10, 20, 30 years without even needing a new body, maybe we could, sort of like car maintenance, that would be one way to go. Now, that we would definitely have to drastically change the stigma of operations, right? Like there are a lot of people who would probably benefit from a variety of procedures, a heart valve transplant, or a stomach stapling, or a liver uh, replacement. I don't know. I'm not medical. I'm not medically educated enough to like say the right things, but kidney transplant. Um, the point is that you know there's some people that just do not want to go under the knife, no matter what. So we need to get to a point where we can get them to be comfortable and be willing to take those chances. Um, so yeah, so cells, cellular. You're saying cells, okay? Cells are meant to last for 125 years. Now I thought maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a genius or nothing. Rex says I'm a genius, but I'm a little more humble than that. What I'm saying is that I think that if cells are recreating themselves every 7 years or so, then aren't we perpetually being recreated. It's kind of confusing. And it's not a bad thing to have a big imagination because that's, like I was saying earlier, like the people that are the quote people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. So we really have we got to think about like what are the things that people are doing um, now that could affect the future. Neuralink is interesting, and I don't know if Neuralink is the way that we put consciousness, human consciousness, into a body, or if that's different. Um, it's not really clear to me how that works. I think that Neuralink is for the uninitiated, for the universal audience, is one of the things that Elon Musk has invented. It's a platform for universal consciousness to express itself in an interesting way. It's the ability to transcend the basic human form and do more, and do it in really amazing ways. You know, um, yeah, the possibility that they can upload shit into your brain. That is the scary part, right? Like mind control would be um, easier than ever if the owner of the service has the ability to put whatever they want into your brain, right? Let's say Elon Musk or whoever in this circumstance decides that something silly like Chef Boyardee is the best brand of spaghetti in the world, and then you all have to believe it just because he said it in your brain. That's you're no longer you. You are just a hijacked consciousness. Um, so maybe if there's a way to have your genuine mind unaltered, unaffected by the powers that be, then maybe, just maybe, things could go well. Now, I don't know how true or untrue that is, but we're living in a world that over time, like, I look at things like Back to the Future, and more and more of that stuff is, maybe their timeline or whatever wasn't correct, but the things that they're creating now, whether it's planes that are the size of cars or hoverboards or 3D projectors, all this stuff is manifesting in a way that we really did predict in those movies. So we will see how it goes. Thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Yeah. lot of this stuff is, you know, it's going to take over the world eventually. And we got to just be aware of that and do our best to combat it. We have to be careful and take into account things that may or may not happen. I think that one thing that is good is to just kind of return to human form. It's, you know, as long as it benefits us, you know, if we're able to exist and do our thing as humans, I think that that could be good. You know, if we can just be calm and accepting of what life throws at us and handle it one step at a time, I think that that is the ultimate ability to handle your life. I think that there's a lot of people who are doing spiritual types of things. I got into Deepak Chopra. I don't know if you know about him, but there's Deepak Chopra. He's a guy, very spiritual, very interesting. If you're not familiar, I really became interested in him from actually a video game of all things. He had a video game called Deepak Chopra's Leela, right? Leela. And what he did was he just used Leela to educate the masses about meditation. And people actually were able to understand things that they never understood before simply through the use of video games. Now, is this common? Probably not. But you know, it's something that happens, and that's the brass tacks. I just think that all right. So these are the I got a phone call. Sorry. I'm back in black. All right, we'll talk soon and have an amazing day.